We're down in the latter part of starting in verse 18. Sometimes in life we have these why bother moments. All of a sudden we begin to feel like we're tired, we're weary, we're sore, we're hurting, and we begin to wonder, is it really worth it? I just want to give up. I want to go back. Well, you look through the history of the Bible, there's been several times when people kind of felt like, why bother? One of the famous ones is there in Exodus. The Israelites have finally been freed from Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea, but they're going out now through this period of wandering, and they're kind of wondering, is it worth it? Why bother? Let's go back to Egypt. At least we know what we had there. And so they're wanting to give up their pursuit of going to that promised land. Well, here in Hebrews chapter 12, again, is another one of those moments that the writer is trying to get across to the people. They're trying to think, why bother? Let's just go back to the old ways, to our Jewish faith. I'm not sure if all this trouble, if all this persecution and troubles we're going through are worth it. And sometimes we kind of get that in our own way of life. We're trying to live right. We're trying to do the right things. But nothing seems to be going right for us. Everything kind of goes wrong. Why bother? I'm just going to go back to my old way of life. And we just tried to give up. So the writer here in chapter 12, he's going to start making comparisons of the old way and the new way. In fact, through the book of Hebrews, the letter to the Hebrews, he addresses this quite a bit. He'll not only call it the old way or the new way, but the old covenant or the new covenant. So today he makes a comparison. Do you want to go back to the old mountain or keep pressing on to the new mountain? So let's go ahead and read this interesting detail of the first mountain. And it's a familiar mountain, Mount Sinai. In fact, it's the one that Moses takes the people to. Let's go ahead and read from Hebrews chapter 12, starting in verse 18 through 21. So he says, "You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness and gloom and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, 'I'm trembling with fear.'" Now, does that scene kind of ring some bells in your mind? You kind of remember what was going on? So here the people have crossed the Red Sea, and they began their journey towards this promised land. And so they had this pit stop in front of Mount Sinai. And of course, it's a region, and we're not sure exactly which specific mountain that they went to. They had some ideas. And so while they were stopped there for 3 days, all of a sudden, Moses gets called by God to go to the mountaintop. And there in the mountain, God speaks to him, and eventually we get the 10 Commandments. And he comes back down. But while they were up there, or before he goes all the way up to the mountain, again, they give some warnings, some cautions to the people. In fact, the writer here in Hebrew kind of details, he kind of points them out. There were 7 images to kind of drive that point home about the events of this terror that kind of went on this day. He says, the mountain could not be touched. It was burning with fire. There was darkness. There was gloom. There was storms and quaking with the storm. There was a trumpet blast. And then there was a voice. And so you put all those things together. It was quite, nerve-wracking for some of the people. And so the writer here says, now you, talking to the Christians, you have not come to a mountain that cannot be touched. See, with Mount Sinai, there was a boundary. They could only go so far. And if they entered across that line, whether a human or with an animal, they would be struck dead. And so he's telling them, be careful. Don't approach the mountain or touch foot on it. For whoever touches this mountain will be put to death. So that put him on guard. So now we have this boundary. But then as we kind of looked out to this mountain, there was these images of fire. It says that the mountain was covered with smoke. It billowed like a furnace, in which clouded the sky. And so there was the darkness, there was the gloom. And so all these were manifestations of God's presence. God was there on that mountain. They could see because they saw the smoke, they saw the warnings, they saw all this that was going on. They were visible manifestations. And so the wanderers were in awe. Wow. But then there was two other manifestations that were auditory, that they could hear. Could you imagine? You got this darkness, you got this fire, you got this smoke, and the quaking of the land. But all of a sudden you begin to hear a sound, and it was and it gets louder and louder. It's a horn, a trumpet blast. So you got all this going on. And you got this horn that was going continuously. And this blast, on the third day, again, just filled the mountains. And the people all of a sudden, began to hear that voice. And it says, the mountain trembled. And then Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. He answered from the fire. And so the people were aware of those boundaries between them and God. And they had this distance. They couldn't approach that mountain any closer. It says over in the end of Hebrews here, also it's found in Exodus 19, in Deuteronomy 4, I believe, as well, that Moses, at the sight of everything, it was terrifying. He says, I'm trembling with fear. And so this was God's presence. They were in awe. They were wondering again what was going on. So that's the old covenant. That was the old way. That's the old mountain. It's interesting, something that we need to pick up on, and we need to remember that the Hebrew writer was trying to get across there to the people who were, again, trying to think about shrinking back, going back to the old covenant, the old ways. He says, we have not, but instead, so we have not come to this old mountain. We've come to a new mountain. So these two mountains, again, are representing, the new covenant and the old covenant. And there's, again, a very stark contrast between the both of them. So the writer's telling the believers, again, we have not come to the old covenant. We have not come to Sinai, a place of fire, darkness, and gloom. But rather, we have come to the new covenant. We've come to the Mount Zion. And he goes on and begins telling them, whenever he makes these comparisons throughout the writer, he always goes from the lesser to the greater. So we've come to Mount Zion, the new mountain, the mount of joy instead of the mount of fear. So thankfully, as the new believers, we have this same mountain. So look at verse 22. Then we'll pick it up. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the heavenly Jerusalem, the city of the living God. You've come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You come to God, the judge of all men, to the spirits of the righteous men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Now, wouldn't you rather enter the Mount Zion than Mount Sinai? So these people are going through this dark time. He's reminding them, we're not going to this old way, a place that looks terrifying, scary, but we're going to a place of hope, a place of joy, the new covenant, the Mount of God, the dwelling of God. And so the writer kind of, in the Old Testament, with the old mountain, Mount Sinai, he listed 7 things. Well, he listed 7 dynamics here with the new one. The heavenly Jerusalem, the city of God, God's dwelling. Remember we sing that song, I'm marching on to Zion, the beautiful city of God. And so we've got that reminder. Thousands and thousands of angels in a joyful celebration. The church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. The God of all people. The spirits of the righteous who were made perfect. Jesus the mediator. And then sprinkled blood, the blood of Christ that speaks better than the blood of Abel. So we have the sharp contrast, this picture of those gathered at Mount Zion. Again, it communicates, exaltation, warmth, love, acceptance, relationships, relief, comfort, and hope. And so it's the heavenly city, that God's dwelling, the city of God. And that phrase, the heavenly city, is used a few different times throughout the Bible. But one that'll be found in our next chapter, chapter 13, verse 14, it says, "For we do not come to an enduring city, but we're looking forward to the city that is to come." We're looking for that new Jerusalem, the Zion, the heavenly city. And so, again, we had that hope. We got this brightness coming instead of this darkness. And he said there'll be multitudes of angels. There'll be innumerable, or something. We get the phrase, 10,000 angels is, from this passage. Again, it's a joyful assembly. People are gathered there to worship. That phrase, joyful, or sometimes it may say festal celebration, it's the only time it's used in the New Testament. It's generally associated with parties or celebratory atmosphere. Many times, like around athletic events like the Olympics, when people are gathered to celebrate the accomplishment of the victors. Well, he's saying that's the way it is, with the worship. The angels are gathered. They're celebrating, God and his love for us. He said, we're going to be part of that. We're going to be assembled with those angels in that joyful celebration. Doesn't that sound good? It does give you a little hope to kind of, I want that. I want to be part of that. I'm going to get up. I'm going to arise and keep marching to that city for that gathering, that joy of delight. And then it says, again, the church of the firstborn, those that have been called out, that those who are assembled, the gathering. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later on at another time about the ecclesia and being called out. But he says, again, with the firstborn, again, it gives you the right. You're the ones that have the inheritance. And so he talked a lot about that in Romans 8. So again, we're part of the firstborn. And our names are written in the book of life. It's surprising how often that phrase, your names are written in the book of life, is mentioned throughout the Bible. In fact, it goes all the way back to Exodus 32, verse 32. It says, "But now, please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book which you have written." So Moses, again, is bargaining on behalf of the people. He says, please, forgive their sin. If not, take me, take my name off the book and let them go in my place. Psalm 69, verse 28 says, may they be blotted out the book of life and not be listed with the righteous. So again, the psalmist is saying, hey, those sinners, they're giving me trouble. Blot them out, but leave my name listed among the righteous. And the last one, well, two more. Daniel says, but at that time your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book, will be delivered. And finally, Jesus, talking to his apostles, says, however, do not rejoice with the spirits that submit to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. So, is your name written in the book of life? Are you part of the firstborn, those who receive the inheritance? And also, he's trying to give us encouragement to continue on, to move out. Again, that we have, in the Old Covenant, Moses was the mediator. He's the one that went in between God and the people. For us, we have Jesus as our mediator. And Jesus is the one that represents us before God. So again, another great blessing that we have. And again, he talks about we had the sprinkled blood, the blood of Christ, the blood that cleanses us of our sins. And it speaks better than the blood of Abel. The blood of Abel, again, was just, crying out. And so here we have the better blood. And finally, he kind of concludes and kind of gives a final warning to the people. Let's go ahead and read verse 25. So see to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him, who warned them on earth? How much less will we, if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven? At that time, his voice shook the earth. But now he promised once more, I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken. That is, created things. So that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship acceptably with the reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. In this passage, the writer is quoting from Haggai, the prophets. He says, I will shake the heavens and the earth and the dry land and the sea. So he's trying to give us caution. He says, if you're not going to listen to God or to Jesus and be warned and go back and follow him, who are you going to listen to? So remember that things are going to be shaken. And just like they were back in the time of Haggai. But this time, it's really going to be shaken. And that the only thing that's going to survive is the spiritual. That all the physical things are not going to survive. So whatever cannot be shaken will remain. But everything that can be shaken will be gone. So he says, therefore, we're receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. It's immovable. And so that's a blessing of being part of God and part of Mount Zion. It cannot be shaken. It's going to be eternal. It's going to last forever. And so be thankful, rejoice. Again, you may be going through some hard times, but you got to keep persevering. You got to keep going. One of the phrases that's kind of popular right now in helping people to get through times, he says, remember your why. Remember your purpose. And in that remembering your why, so maybe you set a goal and you kind of decide why you want to accomplish this goal. I want to lose so much weight. So why do you want to lose that weight? What's your why for doing it? Well, I want to do it for my family. I want to live longer. I want to be healthy. I want to be more involved in our athletic. And so we have all these whys why we want to accomplish this goal. And so when you're going for that refrigerator and you see that ice cream in there or what other treats, remember your why. If you eat that, oh no, it tastes good now, a little relief, but it's not going to help you to accomplish that goal. So why do you exercise every day? Well, because of these things. And so whatever your goal is, and I'm so tired, I want to go to bed, but you want to also learn a new skill or a new craft, and so again, you get up and you go do it. And so because again we understand that why, and so with living our faith, we have to remember our whys. When life gets tough, nothing seems to be working out. Well, here for us, remember your mountain. Remember Mount Zion and the new covenant. Being there with God, being there with the righteous. I didn't even mention that part. Those who have been made perfect, those who have gone before us. He talks about a lot of those in Hebrews chapter 11. The great cloud of witnesses. And it goes on and on and on of all these different blessings of why we want to keep moving forward. So remember your whys. One of the beautiful phrases he kind of ends with, and we'll wrap up with, is here that again, so we're thankful, and so let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God's a consuming fire. And that's a quote from Daniel, but we're reminding again that we come before God. And so as our invitation song, I want us to sing on Zion's glorious summit. And it kind of sums up this passage. Again, that we come before God, we're still in awe of God. We still worship Him, and we worship Him in acceptable ways because, again, our God is a great God. He's a consuming fire. We see what He's done in the past. But He's also a God of love, and God who loves us so much that He gave us His Son. And so if your name is not written in the book of life, you've never been given your life to Christ, you've never been baptized in Him, make Him your Lord and Savior, we encourage you to do so. If you want to talk about that, we're here for you. Or maybe you're kind of going through some tough times, you just need some encouragement, some prayers. Again, we have our prayer cards in the pew in front of you. You can fill those out, and we'll collect those and pray for you at this time. So let us stand, and let's sing on Zion's glorious mountain. And as we sing this song, kind of reflect on this passage.
I worship you, Almighty God. There is none like you. I worship you, O Prince of Peace. That is what I want to do. I give you praise, for you are my righteousness. I worship you.